How we doing, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Wolf, and welcome back to Path of Exile for another build guide. Now, it's been a little bit since we've done one of these, but I have two coming up for you in very quick succession. This is going to be my solo self-found Righteous Fire Marauder. Now, I have two variants of this that I'm going to show you today. I messed around a little bit with a more HP variant of it today, what I'm calling the training wheels off version, but I do have both of them for you, and I will show and explain the pros and cons to both of them. Now, of course, I am playing in solo self-found at the moment, which means that if you look at my gear in game, if I could hit the correct button, like so, you'll see that I am missing a few, you could say, build-defining uniques. Because I do, of course, plan to, for example, use a Comb's Heart, but considering I'm in solo self-found, getting the gear that I need becomes ever so difficult, especially when you plan on playing a few different builds. Devoting yourself to one becomes more and more difficult as time goes on. So for that, I will, of course, tell you everything that I plan on using, and you can plan around that. Now, to start us off, we're going to go through the gear I'm using for the moment, and then the skill tree and that sort of stuff. I'm going to try and do it in a semi-decent order, hopefully anyways. So, to start us off, we're going to go with our weapon. At the moment, I'm using a Balefire. I had one drop, which is exceptional. It means I can use level 25 Scorching Ray without having to have it socketed anywhere, as well as the major benefit to this is that I get 3% of my max life back on kill, which essentially, so long as we're killing stuff, makes us near immortal. Now, I would switch this out for the Aziri Scepter, the Doriani's Catalyst, I think it is. It gives you like 120% increased elemental damage, but on the current variation that I'm playing that goes for near 7k max life, this Scepter makes it a whole lot more playable just because of that recover life on kill, and I feel like if I were to play the Dory's one, it wouldn't work as well. The gem setup that I have in here is an Enduring Cry and Phase Run with increased duration support. The Phase Run is for doing fossil stuff in the darkness, and the Enduring Cry is just because I like surviving. When you hit Enduring Cry, because we're playing Juggernaut as well, there is a chance you just get filled up to your maximum endurance charges, which on this build is 7. Considering we get life regeneration per endurance charge, we're able to survive for quite a while. Moving on to my helmet. This one is kind of an average piece. We're going for max life in pretty much every single slot that we can get it. And having percent increased max life from fossils is exceptional. Everything else at that point is just a bonus. The helmet roll that you want, or the helmet that you do want, is an armor flat base elder helmet, because what I wanted to do was go for an elder armor helmet and roll it as a pseudo 6-link, get burning damage and concentrated effect, and then use that with hopefully some max life and percent life on it. And that would allow me to use Comb's Heart because I could have a 6-link RF setup. So that is what I would opt for a helmet. In my current setup, I have a Vengeance setup. I've been hearing about this from one of my moderators in stream, so I figured I would mess around with it a little bit. It seems to work quite well, and it's a little bit of extra defensive layering. Of course, not required, but it is something I've been messing around with. That is Vengeance, life gain on hit, endurance charge on melee stun, and culling strike. This allows you to get extra endurance charges, some life on hit, and just a little bit of extra damage. And we'll get into that in a little bit, because there's a system that sort of melds with that I'll explain in just a little bit. From there, we're going to go to our shield. Now, in the variation that I'm playing right now, which I messed around with today, opting for more life over kind of fire damage and sustainability, trying to get my life pool as high as possible, I found a Lion Eyes Remorse today. I was messing around with my Rise of the Phoenix before that I had luckily gotten dropped for me, which works quite well as well, but this of course gives us a metric shit ton of max life, and as a result it increases that pool by quite a bit. The only real reason I'm using this one is of course for the max life. If you're using the kind of safer option, go for a Rise of the Phoenix here, of course, because max fire res is exceptional. The links in here is Summon Stone Golem with cast while damage taken, and a Molten Shell. Molten Shell with cast while damage taken. Essentially, you get hit, and then you get an Absorption Shield that will eventually explode, do fire damage, etc, etc. Absorption Shield, always nice. What's really major here is the Summon Stone Golem. If you're seeing me take any degen at any point during any gameplay or that sort of thing, it is most likely from not having the Summon Stone Golem up at the time. This gives 103 flat life regeneration per second, which allows you to sustain quite a bit. Now, I have this linked up to cast while damage taken, because whenever I manually cast it, the bastard always dies on me. So this means that I can have him summoned passively without me really having to worry. I've of course leveled him up to 19, so make sure you're leveling your cast when damage taken accordingly, or else it won't summon him. I've had that problem happen quite a bit, because I didn't look at it correctly, or I right-clicked off the wrong cast when damage taken, so keep an eye on that. Otherwise, it will get kind of awkward. Now, my necklace is a piece of trash, in my opinion. I'm just using it so I have the intelligence to be able to use my current chest piece. These solo self-found struggles are very, very real. Here I would of course go for, which one is it? The Impresence? The Fire Impresence? Is what I would probably go for flammability, for the free aura. If you're of course playing in solo self-found, in standard, and min-maxing. Go for a Zophs or an Impresence. That would work very, very well for you. This one just has some max life, some elemental resist, and of course, because I need to use it to use my chest piece, which we will cover right now. I have a max life fire res 5 link. I'm primarily using it for the links. Of course, I would go for a Comb's Heart optimally if I was able to. I am trying to farm it, and I did end up getting a Comb's Heart card, but yeah, it's 7 cards for the Comb's Heart, so it's not exactly easy to get. But the links I'm using is Vol Righteous Fire. Vol Righteous Fire is huge, by the way. I did calculations in Path of Building, because I have that now, and it's very useful. And I found that with my normal Righteous Fire, I would have about 68k DPS. And when I would turn on Vol Righteous Fire, it would go up to 284k DPS. That's quite a big jump. It's quite a big jump. So Vol Righteous Fire is very, very useful. In that link setup, I have Burning Damage. I also have Elemental Focus, Concentrated Effect, and Area of Effect. Now, one thing to be very wary about with Righteous Fire is it says it grants you more spell damage on the bottom there, and that is meant to pretty much trick you. Righteous Fire in no way whatsoever scales with spell damage. It only scales with elemental damage, damage over time, burning damage, and area damage. That's pretty much it. I think there may be one more in there that I'm missing, but spell damage is not a factor, and because of that, Righteous Fire isn't considered a hit. This also means that Leech and stuff like Fire Leech doesn't work either. I know I planned for a Dory's Invitation as a belt. It didn't plan out. First of all, I didn't get one, and second of all, it wouldn't have really done anything. So watch out for that. I've had a few people playing RF come in stream and go, "Why am I doing no damage?" And they had spell damage links everywhere. So it can double cross you. So keep an eye out for that. Now, rings wise, I'll kind of leave this up to you for what you want to do. I would use them as like either 2 pyre rings to go for maximum shit tons of damage, or resistance fillers like mine are right now. If you're rolling an actual ring, make sure you have increased fire damage percent on it, obviously. You can do that with the Scorched Fossil right now in Delve, and then aim for max life on every single piece, because of course we do. Now, this ring has something major, which is adds 1 to 5 lightning damage to attacks. You'll see this is the only damage on my build pretty much anywhere of elemental type, other than a link down in my boots for Ice Nova. That's because we're using Elemental Equilibrium to reduce people's fire resistance. This adds into that, so whenever I shield charge, my shield charge will do lightning damage, which will proc Elemental Equilibrium to lightning to reduce their fire res by 50%, meaning that my RF will chew them up. So try and plan around that, but that also means try not to get any added to fire, or adds fire to attacks or anything like that. anywhere else on the build. Now you'll see I'm using Scorching Ray, but Scorching Ray is also just a degen debuff, so that doesn't have a hit component to it either, so it's not a problem in interfering with elemental equilibrium. And yeah, my other ring is Moku's Embrace. I probably butchered that name, but it has resistance, fire damage, chance to ignite, you know, solo self-found stuff. So either use 2 pyres could work, or use them as resistance fillers. That works as well. Now when it comes to the belt, I am messing around with a max life belt. Here I have another one that I was using that had 27% fire damage and max life, and it was on a Stygian Vise, so I had an Abyssal Socket in there, giving me onslaught on kill. But of course, because I was messing around with max life, I went for my highest max life belt, and this is what I had at the time. Is it really better than the other setup? It's debatable. Of course, I have to pay a little more attention with this setup, and it kind of does a little less damage, but it is very, very tanky. So, I mean, that's a debatable point. I'll show you that when we get to the Path of Building in just a little bit. We get over to the gloves. These are pretty shit, honestly. What I would replace this with is I would put the Doriani's Scepter in here, and then I would put a Flesh and Soul right here, so I could get Rampage. And the thing about Flesh and Soul is on Rampage, you restore 20% of your maximum life. That's every 15 kills. That comes extremely, extremely quickly when you are melting through shit as Righteous Fire. So keep an eye on that. That's what I would personally do. And yeah, that's probably what I would go for. My current one is just max life, resistances, and 1% of life regen from a, a fossil roll. So the setup I have in here is my shield charge. I have it linked to Fortify, Culling Strike, and Life Gain on Hit. Life Gain on Hit is actually like insanely good when you're using your movement skill. If you have the space for the links, go Movement Skill, Fortify, Culling Strike, and Life Gain on Hit. Now, you can use Shield Charge or you can use Leap Slam, whichever one suits your playstyle. I find I like Shield Charge a little bit better. So Flesh and Soul in there if you're playing in Standard, and you can afford it. It's generally pretty cheap and one of my personal favorite items. Belt, you could go for a Dory's as well. Doriani's Invitation for fire damage, but keep in mind the Fire Leech does pretty much nothing. And then my boots, I would probably go for a Combs Roots here and just like push max life as much as possible if I really could, but of course solely self-found, so I'm using a pair that I got pretty early on. As you can see, these are like level 48 or maybe even lower, but everything about this thing rolled exceptionally. 89 max life, high res, high resistances, and then reduced attribute requirements is obviously not required, but it is quite nice, and I mastercrafted movement speed onto this. So all in all, pretty decent pair of boots with what I'm rolling with right now. And in here I have my immortality setup, I suppose you could call it. I have cast when damage taken, Ice Nova, of course, to proc our elemental equilibrium, Enfeeble, defensive layer, and then we have Immortal Call. This is a point of debate. I feel like it works, but sometimes it gets me killed. But it's a point of debate at the moment. So we'll see how it goes. Now when we come down to flasks, flasks are extremely simple. Of course, you always want a staunch flask. This one is a bubbling flask, so I can heal some of it instantly. Always quite nice. This flask I'm going to come back to. I have 2 Quicksilvers. I have one that is a freeze flask, and I have one that is a movement speed flask. A Quicksilver of Adrenaline, so I go fast as fuck. You can pop this, and you can pop your phaser at the same time, and just zoom. It is absolutely exceptional. And then the last thing, I got a 20 qual ruby flask that dropped just flat off, and I was like, huh, okay, sure, I can live with that. This makes it so you get percent maximum to fire resist. So if you look at my defenses and you see I have 76, if I hit 4, I now have 82. This does scale the damage from Righteous Fire and make it do less to you. And this other flask it's a shitty flask, but it's of dousing, and that means that if you turn on Righteous Fire and you press the button over and over again, it won't turn off. If you hit your dousing flask that removes Ignite and removes Burning, you can turn RF on and off at will. Not a lot of people know that, but I found that out pretty much accidentally, so that will help you out quite a bit with survivability and staying power. That is all of my gem links and gem setups and flasks and all that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to cover the Pantheons really quickly because they are actually of note and then we'll get to the skill tree. So for the Pantheons, I have a Crawley. This makes it so you get 5% reduced damage taken from damage over time. Righteous Fire is a damage over time effect, so this actually affects it and you take less damage, which is quite nice, and just makes it so sustaining RF is a little bit easier. Another one is Aberrath, which makes it so you take reduced fire damage while moving. Only 5%, but yet again it does affect RF, so you have 10% reduction on damage taken from RF. 5% flat and another 5% while moving. This makes life very easy for the average RF player. Make sure to take these, they will make your life a lot easier. I would also recommend the Life Flask one if you don't feel like running Aberrath for whatever reason, or you don't think you really need it. And then Brine King is always nice too if you don't need Crawley. Alright, now into the passive skill tree. This is where things start to get interesting. Of course, we're going to start at the very base. We're going to go down out the life way. We're going to leave out this point. I would eventually grab it, but go for the life regeneration and come up, get Heart of the Warrior, get all that life. And we want to come down, and from here is where you can start doing a few different things. I've seen some people path like down and around here and out here and do all these funky shit. But we're going to keep it pretty simple. Come down, grab the life and stuff down here. I got this Art of the Gladiator node. It's not really required, but for my dexterity gear at the moment it is. So this is a debatable one. Grab that life there and Master of the Arena for life regeneration. You essentially want to make your way to endurance charges and life regen nodes. So we come down, get the endurance charge, come down, get the Golem's blood here and the extra life. And then I grab the jewel socket. Jewel sockets are huge for this build because you can get jewels that are pretty much god roll. This one has burning damage. If I were to go to another one, I'll show you why it's pretty much god roll if I get the right one. This one up here has 6% max life and 12% area damage, both of which are extremely useful. Max life is max life, but area damage scales with RF, and RF scales off of your maximum life for extra damage. So this effectively becomes a two extra effects to my RF, 2 ways to get damage. But this also means you can roll, for example, max life, area damage, burning damage, fire damage. That'll cost about 50x, but it is doable. So you can hunt that god roll your whole life, and I hope you get there. But yeah, so grab jewel sockets and that sort of thing, and mess around with those. I did number crunching for burning versus fire and what scales multiplicatively. Well, Keith did, and they're the exact same. So just go for whichever number is higher. Is the effective way to do things. Alright, after you get that, come up, get the jewel socket here. Of course, damage over time, fire damage, works quite well. Come up, Scion Life Cluster, then we want to go left, jewel socket, left, get combat stamina. We want to focus on as much regen as possible, so from here, come down over here, get Arsonist, and then you want to come down and around, get Barbarism, because this is 1% maximum fire res. Quite nice, as I said earlier, affects your Righteous Fire. Come up, get Strength, down, get Stamina. Now this is the node right here that you really need. Life regen per endurance charge. We get 7, so this becomes 1.4% life regen. Quick math. So make sure you get this. It's a major node. And I was factoring in about having it, and then I forgot to take it, and I was a bit of a melon. Make sure you get the jewel socket here as well. I have 20% burning damage in there. Always nice. Now I come down and get blood magic, but this is for the current build variation. If you want to play the safer alternative, stop here and we'll go up on the right hand side instead. But for the moment, I've gone down, got blood magic, got these two, and I plan on taking that one right there, and I can take the nodes here and that node here. But if you want to play the safer one, ignore the alterations I've made here and come up here instead. Now, you can take a few different routes. Personally, I would go up here for a few points, get Shaper, come down, get the life regeneration here, just to make sure you can sustain RF to start, get the jewel socket there, and then from there, we can come back up here, because some people want leveling trees, right? So I figured I would plan it all out for you. Come back up, get Sanctity for life regeneration. So at this point, we're at like about 10%, I want to say, maybe 9-ish%, which is pretty decent. You should find yourself to be pretty much immortal while leveling. Come up, get Discipline, and get Life. Now, this node is debatable. 14% flat damage is just amazing, so I would grab this personally. You can skip a point here if you want to. It's all up to you. Come over and get elemental damage. I get this node in the center for all res because solo self-found, and increased elemental damage is quite nice as well. You could alternatively go like through here maybe if you wanted to. I don't know. That's where I went. It works. Just leave it at that. Elemental damage, strength, get devotion and life, and then get the endurance charge. I did mess around with getting this cluster. It doesn't really work. Damage penetration doesn't affect RF because it's not a hit. Then you could say, why does elemental equilibrium work? It lowers the main stat resistance. It's not doing like damage penetration. So as a result, it still affects RF because it just lowers the stat instead of going through the stat. I know it's confusing, but trust me, this cluster is pretty shit. Burning damage is nice, but I mean, that's pretty much whatever. So now from here, we come back up through here, get equilibrium right here, come up jewel socket, come up, more life regen, and then from here, I go up here, over, get holy fire for a shit ton of damage, get this burning damage and fire damage, and then the plan is to go up here, right, and get heart of flame and all this burning and all this fire damage. Now, that is my current sort of risky-ish setup. If I were to show you the not so risky setup, let me take a look at this one for you. We are using things a little bit differently. You see, I don't go for the blood magic or that sort of thing. If you want to play a little more safe, we, instead of taking the blood magic, this setup had about 5.5k life, but we were able to use 3 auras on it, on top of everything. Because of course this one has no auras, because blood magic will sap your life and pretty much kill you and fuck your day up. But on this one I go and I take elemental overload, because we're messing around with this, because if you shield charge into a pack, you're probably going to crit something, and it'll give you 40% more elemental damage, which means you do more damage with RF. I find myself not shield charging all the time into every single pack, so it wasn't as notable for me, so I skimped on it to get blood magic nodes. But skill tree wise, it's pretty much the same if I'm honest. Yeah, other than the blood magic nodes and that sort of thing. Just yeah, be careful with that setup over there. Now with this setup here that I have, I was running a few different pieces of gear. I was running my Rise of the Phoenix, of course, as a shield to give me increased fire max resistance, and on top of that I had 3 auras going. As I said before, I had Herald of Ash, Purity of Fire, and Vitality. Vitality is a life regeneration aura. I actually have them all here. I have Vitality for 1.60% life per second, which is huge. I had Vol in Purity of Fire. You only need a Purity of Fire. Get this as high level as possible because it'll give you, you and nearby allies gain 3% additional maximum fire resistance. Of course, we talked about maximum earlier. And combined with the shield, gives you like 8% or something like that. So you're at like 82%, and you use the 6% here, and you get like the 90% achievement or whatever it is. And yeah, and then on top of that, we have Herald of Ash, which I didn't realize this was as good as it is, but it gives percent burning damage. So if you don't really need mana or your mana situation's fine, then Herald of Ash will do extra damage for you. But now if you're using Scorching Ray in a setup somewhere, be warned, this will make it so you have like 32 mana, and your mana will pretty much disappear all the time. But that is going to pretty much bring us to the end of this build. There will be gameplay, of course, in the description. You guys know how this works. You may have even overlaid it. I probably did, because I didn't do that in one build and I got ripped out on Reddit, so that was fun. Yeah, you've probably seen some gameplay, but I'm gonna segue into a gameplay portion pretty much right after this. That will be up either the same day or the day afterwards. So yeah, take a look at that, and as always, take care, lads. Thanks for making it to the end of my video. If you enjoyed it, take a look at the 2 pieces of content you're seeing on screen right now. If you wouldn't mind, you can click that big red button and see more updates from me. And if you want to go even further than that, then you can take a look in the description to find my new Patreon link. You boys gotta keep the lights on somehow.